She froze in the dark jungle, her breath shallow, eyes locked on the massive beast before her. Red-striped fur shimmered under alien moonlight. Those glowing eyes didn't blink. Each step it took made the ground tremble. She wanted to scream, but her voice was gone. Behind her, the human whispered, so calm it made her shiver. He's only curious. But then, the beast's lips pulled back, revealing fangs as long as her arm. And something moved, in the shadows behind it. Something for wars. The jungle was alive with whispers. Leaves shifted as if unseen hands brushed against them. The air hung heavy, damp with the smell of wet earth and strange flowers that glowed faintly in the moonlight. Somewhere above, a winged creature let out a long, low cry that seemed to fade into the dark. Commander Vera moved cautiously through the tangled path, every step making the soft ground give way beneath her boots. She could feel her heart beating faster, but it was not because of the jungle. It was because of the massive shape that walked a few paces behind her. She tried not to look, tried to focus on the trail ahead, but every sound, every shift in the air, reminded her it was there. The red-striped beast. She had no name for it, no word in her language that could capture the size, the power, the quiet. Danger it carried. Its fur caught the silver light, every strand shifting with the slow movement of its muscles. When she did glance back, even for an instant, the eyes met hers, glowing, unblinking, sharp as twin blades. Ethan walked beside her, looking far too calm for the situation. His hands were loose at his sides, his steps steady. He had been leading her through this alien wilderness for hours, never once showing fear that bothered her. Only fools or predators could walk through such a place without fear. The beast followed him like a shadow, close enough that its warm breath seemed to touch her back whenever the wind shifted. She didn't understand the bond between them, didn't want to. All she knew was that if that creature decided she was a threat, it could end her before she even had time to draw her blade. A deep rustle came from the side, somewhere in the thick trees. She stopped instantly, her hand hovering near the hilt at her hip. The beast stopped too, lowering its head. Slightly, the glow in its eyes narrowing like a predator's focus. Ethan didn't stop, turned his head just enough to glance at her, a faint smirk on his lips, and kept walking. "Don't fall behind," he said, as if they were simply taking a walk in a garden. Vera wanted to argue, wanted to tell him. He was insane, but something about his tone made her follow without a word. The path dipped lower, into a shallow basin filled with twisting roots and knee-high mist. Here the sounds of the jungle were sharper snaps of branches, the drip of water from somewhere high above, the hiss of something small and unseen slithering away. Her boots sank slightly in the damp earth, and every step felt like it might give way to something underneath. The beast's claws made no sound at all. That was what frightened her. The most tith size suggested it should crash through the forest like a living storm. Yet it moved as silently as drifting smoke. Then it happened. She didn't see it at first, only felt it a weight in the air. A change in the rhythm of the jungle sounds. The usual background noise faded, replaced by the slow, steady sound of breathing. Heavy breathing, close. Her eyes moved without her permission, glancing over her shoulder, and there it was. Not following now, but watching. Its massive head tilted slightly, as if curious, but the mouth hung partly open, and she could see the gleam of fangs long enough to pierce through her chest. Saliva glistened on them in the dim light. Her feet refused to move. The beast took a step toward her, slow but sure. The ground trembled lightly beneath its weight, a vibration that seemed to travel up her legs and into her spine. Her throat felt tight. She had faced warlords, assassins, even the cold vacuum of space, but nothing had made her feel this helpless. Ethan had stopped now, standing just a little ahead of her. He didn't turn, didn't raise a weapon. "Damn." His voice was quiet, almost too quiet for the jungle, but it carried to her like a whisper meant only for her ears. "He's only curious." The words made no sense. This was not curiosity. This was a predator studying prey. She could feel the air between them tighten as the beast took another step. Its eyes glowed brighter now, not with hunger, but with something older, deeper intelligence. It was looking at her as if it could see straight through her skin, straight to her thoughts. She gripped the hilt of her blade, but even that felt like a child's toy in this moment. The beast's breath reached her now, warm. Smelling faintly of metal and blood, her instincts screamed at her to run, but her legs were locked in place. Ethan finally turned his head, not fully, just enough that she could see the calm in his eyes. "If you move too fast," he said softly, "he might think you're running from him, and he hates that." The jungle seemed to grow quieter still, as if holding its breath. Vera's hand tightened on her weapon, but before she could decide whether to draw it, the beast's ear twitched toward the trees to the left. It made a low rumble deep in its chest. The sound was not for her, it was for whatever had just entered the mist. Something moved there, a shadow sliding between the roots too fast for her eyes to follow. The beast shifted its body slightly, placing itself between her and the movement. For one brief heartbeat, she felt a strange thing's safety, as if the same claws and teeth that could tear her apart might also shield her from something worse. She didn't like the feeling, didn't trust it, but she couldn't deny it. Ethan looked at the darkness beyond the mist, his voice almost amused. "Looks like he's not the only one who's curious tonight." The beast's tail swayed slowly, its eyes fixed on the shifting shadows ahead. The mist began to swirl, and a shape started to emerge, taller than a man, hunched forward, its skin a pale gray that reflected the moonlight in broken patches. Its movements were wrong, too smooth, too fluid, as if it wasn't bound by the same laws of muscle and bone. The beast growled, low and sharp. Vera realized her breath had stopped. The thing in the mist took another step forward, and she finally understood. Whatever it was, Razor was not the most dangerous creature here. The mist curled around the pale figure, hiding pieces of its shape and revealing others in flashes of ghostly light. Vera's eyes narrowed, but the longer she looked, the less sense it made. Its arms seemed too long, its hands more like hooked claws than fingers, and its head tilted at an unnatural angle, as if it had been twisted and left that way. She had fought many kinds of enemies before: brutal raiders, cold assassins, even cybernetically enhanced killers, but nothing about this thing fit into what she understood. It didn't feel alive in the way most creatures did. It felt wrong. Razor. The red-striped beast lowered himself until his belly nearly touched the ground. His ears pinned back, and his fangs caught the silver glow of the moon. A low growl rolled from deep in his chest, vibrating through the ground beneath Vera's boots. That sound was not for show, was a promise of violence. Ethan stood in the space between them, his hand resting lightly on Razor's neck. His eyes fixed on the shadow ahead. Vera broke her silence, her voice low and sharp. "What is that?" Ethan didn't look at her. "Something that doesn't belong here," he said simply. His tone carried no fear, only calculation, and that unnerved her more than the sight of the creature itself. The figure stepped closer, its movements so slow they seemed deliberate, as if it were savoring the moment. The mist slid off its shoulders, revealing thin skin stretched tight over protruding bones. It had no eyes, only too deep, black hollows where they should have been. Yet somehow Vera felt its gaze lock onto her. A shiver climbed her spine. The jungle had gone completely still now. No insects, no wind. Even the distant cries of night birds had stopped. It was as if every living thing within earshot knew better than to make a sound. Then, without warning, the creature moved. It didn't walk or run, it glided forward in a burst of unnatural speed, covering half the distance in a heartbeat. Razor roared, the sound shaking the air, and leaped forward so fast that Vera's eyes barely kept up. The beast hit the ground. In front of Ethan, claws gouging into the wet soil, teeth bared wide. The thing stopped. Not out of fear, but as though it were testing the boundaries. Its head tilted again, slow and unnerving, and the empty hollows of its eyes shifted toward Ethan. "Stay behind me," Ethan said quietly, not glancing at Vera. She almost laughed at the command. She was a commander in her own right, trained for war, but something in his tone made her obey. She stepped back, her grip tightening on her blade. Her gaze locked on the standoff ahead. The creature let out a sound, not a growl, not a hiss, but something in between. It was a wet, rattling noise that scraped against the ears. Razor's growl deepened in answer, his tail stiff, his muscles ready to strike. Ethan took a slow step forward, and to Vera's surprise, Razor moved with him in perfect sync. "It's not here for us," Ethan said softly. "It's here for you." The words hit her like a sudden drop in gravity. Her eyes flicked between the two males beast in mainland, the pale, hollow-eyed figure ahead. "Why?" she demanded. "Because you carry something at once," Ethan replied. Vera's heart pounded harder now. There was no way he could know. About the hidden data crystal locked beneath her armor, the one she'd risked her life to protect. The crystal contained navigational maps to something far older and more dangerous than any fleet could imagine. She had never told him. She had never told anyone. The figure in the mist moved again, closer this time, its clawed hands curling as if ready to strike. Razor's roar tore through the jungle, and then he lunged. The impact shook the ground, and the two creatures collided in a spray of dirt and mist. Razor's claws slashed across pale flesh, tearing deep, but no blood came out, only a black, oily liquid that hissed when it touched the soil. Ethan grabbed Vera's arm and pulled her back. His movements quick but controlled. "We need to move. Now." For a moment, her pride urged her to resist. She was no helpless refugee. She was a warrior. But the sound of Razor's fight, the thud of heavy bodies and the screech of the pale creature, told her this was not a battle she wanted to be in the middle of. She ran with Ethan, ducking low beneath the tangled vines and roots, the mist clinging to her like cold fingers. Behind them, the fight raged. Razor's roars echoed through the trees, answered by the inhuman shrieks of the other. The jungle seemed to tremble with each strike, branches swaying as if some invisible wind passed through. They didn't stop running until they reached a ridge that overlooked a dark river. Ethan finally slowed, his breathing even though his eyes stayed sharp on the shadows behind them. Vera turned back, expecting to see the beasts charging after them, but the jungle was still. "Will he kill it?" she asked. Ethan's eyes flicked toward her, and for the first time, she saw something in them she hadn't before: uncertainty. "I don't know," he said. "But if he doesn't, it will keep coming for you." Vera's hand instinctively moved toward the hidden compartment in her armor. The weight of the crystal felt heavier now, as if the creature's presence had awakened something inside it. In the distance, a roar split the night, louder, more furious than before, and then silence. The silence stretched, heavy and unnatural, pressing against Vera's ears until she could hear the beat of her own heart. The jungle still offered no sound, no insects, no rustle of leaves, nothing. It was the kind of quiet that only came after violence, the moment when predators decided who lived and who didn't. Her grip on the hilt of her blade tightened until her knuckles ached. She kept her eyes on the tree line below, half expecting the pale figure to come gliding out of the mist, with Razor's blood dripping from its claws. Ethan crouched low at the ridge, his gaze scanning the shadows. He didn't look afraid, but there was a sharpness to his eyes, now a readiness she hadn't seen in him before. "Stay alert," he murmured. Vera's instincts screamed to move, to put more distance between them and whatever had survived that fight. But part of her needed to know. "What is Razor to you?" she asked in a low voice, still watching the jungle. He didn't take his eyes off the darkness. "He's my partner," Ethan said simply. "And if he's still alive, he'll find us." The way he said "if" twisted in her stomach. A sudden movement caught her attention, a shift in the mist. A branch bending low as if something heavy had brushed past. Both she and Ethan froze. Sound of slow, deliberate footsteps followed, crunching softly through damp leaves. Then a shape appeared at the edge of the clearing. Razor stepped into the moonlight. His fur was matted in places with dark black, stains that steamed faintly in the cool air. His breathing was deep but steady, his glowing eyes locked forward. Vera felt an unexpected surge of relief, until she noticed the deep gashes along his flank. Wounds that oozed the same black liquid he had drawn from the pale creature. Ethan stood, meeting the beast halfway down the slope. "You held your ground," he said quietly, almost like speaking to an old friend. Razor lowered his head slightly. Not in submission, but in acknowledgement. Vera approached more slowly, her eyes flicking between them. "Is it dead?" she asked. Razor's gaze shifted to her, unblinking. Ethan answered for him. "Not yet." Before she could ask what he meant, a sharp sound echoed from the jungle below, a rattling hiss, distant but moving closer. Razor's tail lashed once, his body tense. Ethan's jaw tightened. "It's hunting us now." The three of them moved quickly along the ridge, keeping the river to their right. The terrain grew steeper, the ground slick with moss, the air thick with the smell of rot. The hiss followed, sometimes closer, sometimes farther, but never gone. Vera couldn't shake the feeling that the thing was toying with them, letting them know it could close the distance whenever it wanted. As they reached a narrow pass between two jagged cliffs, Ethan stopped abruptly. His hand went up, signaling silence. Razor froze beside him, ears flicking. Vera strained to hear and caught at a second set of footsteps ahead. Light but fast, approaching from the other side of the pass. "We're boxed in," she whispered. Ethan's eyes narrowed. Not for long. He reached into his pack and pulled out a small device, its surface etched with faint glowing symbols. Vera recognized it instantly. It was a field disruptor, banned on most civilized worlds because of what it could do to organic matter. "You carry that around?" she asked, stunned. "Only when I know something worse than me is hunting," he replied. The footsteps ahead grew louder. Razor moved forward, placing himself in the center of the pass, his body filling the narrow space like a living wall.
"Oh."
Claws dug into the stone, its muscles bunching under striped fur. From the mist ahead emerged not the pale creature. It's a smaller figures. It's hunters, perhaps, or its scouts. They were shaped like the first, with two long arms and eyeless faces, but their movements were twitchier, less graceful. They spread out, each one trying to find a gap around Razor. Ethan tossed the disruptor to Vera, set it for 30 seconds, and run. She caught it, her fingers brushing the controls, her mind racing. "And you? I'll keep them busy." There was no time to argue. Razor lunged at the first creature, slamming it into the rock wall with a force that cracked stone. The second darted low, claws reaching for Ethan, but he sidestepped and drove a plasma blade into its side. The creature didn't scream, it just made that same wet, rattling noise. Even as the blade burned through it, Vera sprinted toward the far end of the pass, the disruptor in her hand ticking down from 30. The hiss from behind grew louder. Closer. She risked a glance over her shoulder and saw the pale figure, larger than before, gliding silently through the mist toward the fight. She nearly stumbled at the sight. The thing wasn't retreating. It was advancing faster than she'd ever seen. It was coming straight for her. Her heartbeat roared in her ears as she realized the truth. Razor and Ethan weren't just fighting to survive. They were buying her seconds, maybe less, before the real monster reached her, and 30 seconds might not be enough. The numbers on the disruptor's display bled away one by one. 26, 25. The glow painting Vera's fingers in a cold blue light as she ran. The narrow pass twisted sharply, leading into a cavern-like opening carved by centuries of river erosion. Water dripped from the ceiling in steady beats, echoing in the stone chamber like the ticking of an enormous clock. Every sound seemed louder, sharper, as if the world had leaned in to watch what happened next. Behind her, Razor's roar thundered through the stone, followed by the screech of rending claws against rock. Ethan's voice cut through the chaos. Short command, low and certain, but it was swallowed almost instantly by the wet, rattling hiss that had haunted them since the first encounter. The sound was closer now, too close. Vera skidded to a stop in the center of the cavern, the disruptor's timer glowing 19. She scanned the space-high walls, no other exits except the way she'd come. A trap. Perfect. She crouched low, wedging the device between two jagged rocks at the base of the wall. The blue light from the disruptor bled into the mist, curling along the floor, making it seem alive. 17. 16. Shadows moved in the fog beyond the pass. She gripped her blade tighter, feeling the thrum of her own pulse in her hands. First of the smaller creatures crawled through, its limbs bending at impossible angles as it pulled itself into the open chamber. The black, eyeless pits of its face locked on her instantly. 15-14. A second one appeared beside it, mouth opening wide enough to split the jaw, a soundless gape before the hiss began again. Deliberate, promising violence. 13-12. Then the bigger shadow came. The pale figure emerged, tall and fluid, the mist curling away from it as if in fear. The faint black liquid from Razor's earlier strike still clung to its chest, but the wound had closed, smooth and unnatural. The hollows of its eyes fixed on her, and though she knew it couldn't see, she felt pinned under its focus. 11-10. It glided forward, its claws brushing the ground, each step silent despite the echoing chamber. Razor exploded into the cavern behind it, slamming one of the smaller creatures to the ground with enough force to crack its spine. The other turned to intercept him, but Ethan was right behind, plasma blade flashing as it cut through the air. 9-8. The larger creature ignored the fight entirely. Its attention never wavered from Vera. She stepped back, her shoulders touching the cavern wall, blade angled in front of her. The thing's head tilted again, a slow, unnatural movement, and it made a low, rumbling hiss, unlike the others deeper. Heavier. 7-6. It lunged. Veryra. Dove to the side, her blade slashing across one of its arms. The strike cut deep, but no cry came, only a spray of that hissing black liquid as the limb jerked unnaturally, bones shifting like liquid under its skin. It swung back at her with terrifying speed, the claws missing her face by inches, gouging deep lines in the stone wall where she'd stood. 5-4. Out. Ethan's voice tore through the chamber. Razor barreled into the larger creature from the side, his fangs locking around its shoulder, dragging it backward with a roar that shook the walls. Ethan grabbed Vera's arm, yanking her toward. The pass! She resisted for a fraction of a second, her gaze snapping to the disruptor wedged in the rocks. 3-2. They ran. The sound of claws and roars and that relentless hiss chased them up the pass. The air around them seemed to vibrate with a strange energy, the stone itself humming underfoot. 1. The blast was silent at first, then the air imploded. A white-blue pulse of light erupted from the cavern, swallowing the mist in a blinding wave. The ground shook violently, the sound of shattering stone echoing like thunder through the pass. Razor leapt past them in a single bound, landing heavily but without breaking stride. His eyes blazing with light reflected from the blast behind. They didn't stop until they reached the far end of the ridge, the river a dark slash below them. The night air here was cleaner, free of the damp, choking mist of the jungle floor. Vera collapsed to one knee, gripping the edge of the ridge, her chest heaving. Ethan stood beside her, scanning the darkness for movement. "Is it over?" she asked. Razor lifted his head, ears twitching toward the jungle they'd left behind. For a long moment, there was nothing. No hiss, no movement. Just the whisper of the river below, then faint and distant, carried on the wind. Came that same deep, rattling hiss. The hiss on the wind froze Vera's blood. It was faint, but it carried an unmistakable promise. Whatever had survived that disruptor blast was not limping away to hide. It was coming, and it had their scent. Ethan didn't move for several long seconds, his gaze fixed on the jungle. Canopy swaying in the distance. Razor stood beside him, tail stiff, muscles tight, his ears swiveling to catch sounds that hadn't yet reached human hearing. When Ethan finally spoke, his voice was low and deliberate. "We can't stay in the open. It's faster than us here." Vera pushed herself up, her knees aching from the run. "Where?" she demanded, scanning the dark ridgeline. The jungle on one side, the drop into the Black River on the other there. Was nowhere to go that didn't feel like suicide. Ethan's eyes flicked toward a shadowed rise to the east. The old ruins, stone halls, tight corridors. If it wants us in there, it'll have to fight on our terms. Razor's head turned sharply toward Ethan at the mention of the ruins, a low rumble starting deep in his chest. It wasn't fear, it was warning. You've been avoiding that place, Vera said, watching the way Ethan didn't quite meet her eyes. Why? Because the thing hunting you, Ethan replied, might not be the worst thing waiting in there. She didn't like the answer, but another hiss echoed across the ridge, louder now, closer. The choice was gone. He ran. The path to the ruins was narrow, winding through rock formations shaped by centuries of wind and rain, vines draped over. The stones like the veins of the jungle itself, some glowing faintly in the dark, others twitching when brushed. The air grew colder the higher they climbed, and soon the jungle sounds faded into a muffled hush, replaced by the faint sigh of wind through unseen cracks in stone. When they reached the first wall of the ruins, Vera's breath caught, massive. Stone blocks rose from the earth, carved with symbols that pulsed faintly as if remembering old power. The structure loomed over them, parts swallowed by the jungle, others perfectly preserved, untouched by time. Wide, jagged steps led to a broken archway, shadows within so deep they seemed to swallow the moonlight entirely. Razor paced at the edge, his head low, eyes scanning the black opening. He didn't want to go inside. That alone made Vera hesitate. Another hiss rolled up the ridge, no longer faint. Ethan moved first, climbing the steps without a pause. If you're coming, now's the time, he called back. Vera followed, her hand brushing the hilt at her hip. Razor hesitated. Only a moment longer before bounding up the steps, his claws clicking against the ancient stone. Inside, the temperature dropped sharply. The air smelled of old dust and something else, something metallic and faintly sweet, like blood left too long in the heat. The corridor stretched ahead, its walls lined with carvings of tall, thin figures, with long arms and hollow eyes.
Oh yeah, there.
Heads were tilted in the same unnatural way as the thing hunting them. Charming, Ra muttered under her breath. Ethan's voice echoed softly in the narrow hall. These ruins are older than both our people. Some say they were built by the first hunters. Vera glanced at the carvings again and noticed something she didn't like. The figures weren't holding weapons. They were holding chains. A sudden noise behind them snapped her attention to the archway. The hiss was inside now. Razor moved. To the rear, his body filling the corridor as he stared into the darkness they'd just come from. The sound of claws on stone answered him. Ethan quickened his pace, leading them deeper into the ruin. The corridor widened into a high circular chamber, its ceiling lost in shadow. In the center stood a massive stone pillar covered in symbols, its base ringed by shallow grooves that glistened as if wet. The air here felt heavier, the kind of weight that made breathing harder. Vera's gaze drifted upward, and her stomach tightened. Shapes clung to the ceiling, long-limbed and unmoving. Dozens of them. Their pale bodies were the same as the hunters, only smaller. Their eyeless faces all turned toward the floor. They're dormant, Ethan said, reading her reaction. If we don't wake them, they won't. A roar cut him off. Razor launched himself toward the corridor they'd entered from, his body colliding with something just beyond the arch. The hiss that followed rattled through the chamber like a living thing. The hunter was here. The dormant creatures above shifted in unison, sound like dry leaves scraping over stone, filling the air. One dropped silently from the ceiling, landing. Behind Vera, with a bone-cracking thud, Ethan's plasma blade flared to life. Too late, he said grimly. The hiss became a chorus. The chamber erupted in chaos the moment the first pale body hit the floor. Its limbs snapped into motion like blades on a hinge, claws raking the stone where Vera had stood a heartbeat earlier. She rolled to the side, her blade flashing in the dim glow of the carvings. The creature was faster than anything that size had a right to be, but she'd trained for close combat all her life. Her strike caught its side, cutting a deep line that oozed black liquid. The wound hissed against the floor, releasing. A sour, burning scent above. More of them dropped from the ceiling, their eyeless heads tilting toward the movement below. The sound of their landing was sickening, bones meeting stone, claws scraping for grip. The air grew thick with their rattling breaths, blending with the deeper, heavier hiss of the hunter in the corridor. Razor hit the hunter head-on, his roar shaking dust from the ancient walls. Ow! The impact cracked the stone around the archway. The hunter slid back a step but didn't fall, his claws locking against the beast's shoulders, muscles shifting like coiled cables beneath pale skin. The two predators pushed against each other. Every movement, a struggle for dominance. Ethan moved with purpose, his plasma blade sweeping wide to keep the smaller creatures from surrounding them. "Vera, back to the pillar," he shouted over the noise. She parried another claw strike and did as he said. Retreating toward the massive stone column in the center of the chamber. As she pressed her back against it, her hand brushed one of the shallow grooves at its base. A pulse of faint blue light rippled out from the point of contact, racing around the column. The carvings lit up in sequence, glowing brighter with each symbol it touched. The creatures reacted instantly. They screeched, their bodies jerking as if the light burned them. A few scrambled back into the shadows, but most pressed forward, their movements more frenzied than before. Ethan's eyes widened. "It's a key," he said, voice quick, urgent. "You have it, the thing it's after?" Vera's mind flashed to the data crystal hidden in her armor. How would that— She didn't get to finish. One of the creatures lunged, claws aimed for her throat. Razor's massive paw shot out, swatting it aside midair before he twisted to bite down on the hunter's arm. The hunter hissed, louder than before, and slammed its other hand into Razor's flank, digging in deep. Blood, real blood, this time sprayed across the floor. Razor snarled, unyielding, his jaws tightening until bone cracked beneath his teeth. Vera pulled the crystal from its compartment, the small object glowing faintly in her palm. The reaction from the creatures was immediate. They shrieked in unison, their movements becoming a violent rush toward her, whatever that thing holds. Ethan shouted, cutting down two more as they leaped at him. "It's waking this place up. It's not happy." The glow from the pillar intensified, casting harsh shadows across the chamber. Symbols higher up began to flicker, and somewhere deep within the ruins, a grinding noise echoed, like massive stone doors sliding open. One of the smaller creatures broke past Ethan, darting low toward Vera. She brought her blade down hard, the steel biting through its neck. The headless body writhed on the floor before collapsing into a twitching heap. The hunter slammed Razor into the wall with a force that sent cracked spider-webbing through the stone. Razor hit the ground but rolled back to his feet in an instant, blood matting his fur, his eyes still blazing. Ethan stepped between Vera and the hunter, plasma blade raised. "Can't hold this forever. If you've got a way to end it, now's the time." Vera looked at the crystal, then at the pillar, the glowing grooves seeming to pulse in rhythm with her heartbeat. She didn't know exactly what would happen, but instinct told her this was more than a key, it was a weapon. She slammed the crystal into the groove, where her hand had been moments before. The light surged up the column in a blinding wave, filling the chamber with a low, resonant hum that made her bones vibrate. The creatures screamed a sound so sharp it stabbed into her skull. They convulsed, their limbs twisting in unnatural angles before turning rigid, their bodies freezing mid-motion. One by one they collapsed, black liquid pooling beneath them. The hunter staggered, its grip on Razor loosening. Its hollow eyes turned toward the pillar, and for the first time, Vera thought she saw something like fear in the way it moved. The hum grew louder. Carvings on the walls began to shift, not just glow, but physically change, the stone writhing like something alive beneath its surface. "Vera." Ethan's voice was tense. "You've started something." The hunter hissed again, but this time it stepped back from Razor. Its body shimmered faintly, as if the air around it were bending. Without warning, it retreated into the shadows at the far end of the chamber, gliding out of sight. The hum didn't stop. In fact, it grew deeper, stronger, and the ground began to shake. The floor split open beneath them with a deep, grinding roar, dust and ancient debris raining down from the ceiling. Ethan grabbed Vera's arm, pulling her away from the widening crack, as slabs of stone slid aside to reveal a chasm glowing with pale blue light. It wasn't just a pit, it was something alive, pulsing faintly like the heartbeat of a massive creature sleeping far below. Razor. planted himself between them and the chasm, his fur bristling. The wounds from the battle still bled, but his stance was unbroken, his gaze fixed on the swirling mist rising from the depths. The hum from the pillar was now a vibration in the air, thick enough to feel in the chest. At every second it grew stronger. From the mist came shapes tall, skeletal figures draped in fragments of silver armor. Their faces were hidden beneath masks that glowed faintly from within, and in their hands they carried long, blade-like weapons that shimmered with unnatural light. They stepped silently onto the stone floor, their movements in perfect unison, as though one mind guided them. All Vera's pulse hammered in her ears. "They're not the same as before," she whispered. Ethan shook his head slowly. "No. These are older." The masked figures advanced without hesitation, their steps soundless even on the stone. One tilted its head slightly, as though studying, then raised its weapon in a slow, deliberate motion. Razor's growl rumbled deep and low, a warning that echoed through the chamber. The lead figure stopped just for a moment before a voice, soft and impossibly calm, filled the air without moving its masked lips. "Return the heart." Vera clutched the crystal tighter, feeling a strange heat radiating from it now. "Don't know what you mean," she said, but the words felt like a lie even to herself. Somewhere deep down, she understood exactly what they wanted because the crystal was no longer just glowing.
Eyes.
It was pulsing, in perfect time with the blue light in the chasm. Ethan stepped forward, keeping his plasma blade up. "You're not taking it," he said flatly. The masked warriors didn't hesitate. They moved forward in sudden, fluid bursts of speed, their blades leaving streaks of light in the air. Ethan barely had time to block the first strike. Metal rang against energy, sparks spraying across the stone. Vera ducked under a sweeping slash, rolling toward the base of the pillar. If the crystal had awakened this place, maybe the same power could protect them.
Ow.
She slammed her palm against the glowing grooves again, but this time, the stone didn't respond. The hum didn't change. The warriors pressed harder, their movements relentless. Every blow they struck seemed to drive Ethan and Razor back toward the edge of the chasm. Razor lashed out with his claws, catching one across the chest and tearing away a chunk of ancient armor. Beneath it, there was no flesh, only a lattice of light and shadow, like a skeleton made of energy. The wound closed in seconds, the glow knitting itself back together. "They're not alive," Ethan said through clenched teeth. "At least, not the way we understand it." Vera's mind raced. The crystal, chasm, the warriors, all connected. She looked down at the object in her hand, the glow now blinding. Her instinct screamed that holding it any longer would mean something irreversible. The lead warrior stepped closer, ignoring Razor's snarling bulk. Its masked face tilted toward her, and the voice came again, quieter now, but carrying the same. "Wait, if the heart beats, the world ends." The floor beneath them shook violently. Dust poured from the ceiling. The glow from the chasm intensified, the pulsing now so fast it was like a constant vibration. Ethan's eyes locked on hers. "Vera, whatever choice you're about to make it now." Her fingers tightened around the crystal. The hum rose into a deafening tone, the kind that could shatter glass. The masked warriors froze mid-step, their heads turning toward the chasm as if something down there had just awakened. From the depths, something massive began to rise. The chasm split wider with a deafening crack, the sound echoing through the ancient chamber like the world itself was tearing apart. A stone bridges crumbled into the blue abyss as an enormous shadow began to rise, blotting out the light from below. The hum had become a roar, now deep, endless. The sound of something older than history waking from a dream it should never have left. The masked warriors, those relentless, perfect soldiers, staggered for the first time. Their heads turned in unison toward the darkness in the pit, their weapons lowering slightly, like even they feared what was coming. One of them stepped back, its glowing mask flickering faintly. From the depths came a single, booming exhale that rattled every bone in Vera's body. Razor's ears flattened against his skull. His massive frame coiled and tense. Ethan tightened his grip on the plasma blade, but his eyes stayed on the chasm. Wide with the realization that the fight had just changed, then it emerged. A colossal, serpentine form slid upward, scales like plates of dark metal reflecting the pale glow. The size of shields opened slowly, each one burning with molten gold light. The thing's head alone was bigger than the chamber, and when it moved, the air bent around it. The masked warriors dropped to one knee in perfect unison, their weapons laid flat against the floor. That calm, disembodied voice filled the air. Again not directed at Vera this time, but at the thing rising before them. The heart beats again. Master. The creature's gaze shifted to Vera, and though it didn't speak with words, the meaning hit her mind like a hammer. It knew. She had the crystal. It knew she had awakened it. Ethan stepped between them, but the serpent's attention didn't waver. Its massive jaw shifted, plates sliding over one another. It spoke in a voice that was 100 voices at once, male, female, human, alien, all layered into a single sound. Give it to me, and I will spare this world. Vera's heart pounded. The masked warrior stayed kneeling, silent. Even Razor didn't move, his instincts screaming that this was something beyond teeth and claws. Her mind raced. If she gave the heart away, maybe it would leave. Maybe it would keep its promise. But something deep in her gut told her that wasn't the truth, that this thing had slept for a reason. The crystal wasn't a gift. It was a lock. She tightened her grip on the glowing shard. The molten light in the serpent's eyes brightened. The chasm rumbled again. The edges collapsing further, the whole world trembling under the thing's weight. Ethan's voice was low, urgent. Vera, choose. The hum in her hand became unbearable heat. The glow now so bright, it turned the chamber white. She could feel the crystal breaking, changing. The serpent rose higher, its coils filling the chamber. The golden eyes narrowing in hunger or rage. Vera took one last breath, then she threw the crystal into the chasm. The reaction was instant. The blue glow erupted into white fire, racing upward and slamming into the serpent with a force that shook the chamber apart. The masked warriors disintegrated in a flare of light, their weapons scattering into nothing. The serpent screamed not in pain, but in fury before the fire pulled it downward. Dragging its massive coils back into the depths, the chasm sealed in seconds, the sound of stone grinding echoing into silence. The hum was gone. The light was gone. Only darkness and dust remained. Vera fell to her knees, coughing, her ears ringing. Ethan helped her up, his voice hoarse. It's over. But Razor's low growl said otherwise. His gaze was fixed on the sealed chasm, his tail twitching in slow, deliberate warning. Somewhere far below, in the silence, came the faint sound of stone cracking again. It wasn't over, not yet.